Hello and welcome again to the question and answer session here on SUZA TV. You're going to be with me, Munir Mustafa, as we continue to delve into questions which are brought in the biology subject. Today's topic would mark the end of our journey, as this would be the last topic in the biology syllabus for Form 4. So make sure to pay extra attention and make sure to pay more attention and watch on how to answer these tricky questions, as they can be very tricky. Some questions may not look as how they are. So without wasting any further time, let's start with the questions. Question 1 states that what are the problems which affect the people on HIV AIDS? Answer by referring to the victims, the government, and family. So in a question like this question is pretty straightforward, as it requires a person to answer on how HIV AIDS affects people. But you should categorize it, as it refers to on how it affects people on the level of the victim themselves, the people suffering from HIV AIDS. Then there is the government, on how does the government suffer due to HIV AIDS, and the family of the victims, on how does the family of the victims suffer through or in terms of HIV AIDS, on how does HIV AIDS make the families suffer. So in answering a question like this, it just requires your own brainstorming on how to do it. So in brainstorming it, you can answer a question like this, but most of the time what is required is the essay form. As in Form 4, from the beginning of Form 3, most questions which you are asked are required to be answered in essay form. So without wasting any time, the answer states that people living with HIV AIDS are usually affected by many problems. These problems are usually depicted through many outlets, such as problems which face the family, problems which face the government, and problems which face the victims themselves. In terms of the family, the most common problem is financial problems. Why should I say financial problems? Because the family is faced by taking care of the patient. So in taking care of the patient, it requires medication, it requires the centers, it requires paying the health and guidance counselors. So in taking into consideration all of this, this means that the family would suffer financially. Also, they face a social problem. As we can see in the family, not all people are accepting to people with HIV AIDS. There are some people who would accept them due to the goodness of their hearts, while there are some people who would shun and discriminate them due to the fact that in their minds they're saying that people with HIV AIDS are worthless. They are nothing but dead weight, so there is no use for them. Due to the fact that these two groups are in constant fighting, it brings to the collapse of the family. So in the eyes of the society, the family looks dysfunctional. It looks like it's not as a real family. So this is a problem brought by HIV AIDS. It affects the family in this way. Also, the government faces a lack of enough centers to take care of the people. Also, inadequate finances and little attention paid to the people living with HIV centers, and instead other sectors are being taken into consideration. So the government is faced by problems through which First of all, we know the government of many African countries, such as Tanzania, Zanzibar, Kenya, Uganda, Rwanda, Burundi, and other countries, is that they are financially unstable. We have a low budget. Our budget does not cover enough money, or it does not put enough money in the people living with HIV AIDS centers. So not many centers are built, and even if they are built, not many centers are being taken care of. That you can see the centers lack equipment, they lack medications, they lack even the basic services in which people living with HIV AIDS need. So the government is faced by this problem, and also that they do not take into much consideration the people living with HIV AIDS sector. Instead, they look at tourism sectors, infrastructure sectors, traveling sectors, many sectors, but people living with HIV AIDS sectors is not taken into consideration. Therefore, it suffers. Also, in the term for the victims themselves, they are faced with social problems. One of them is social discrimination, in which, in the eyes of society, a person living with HIV AIDS is a subject of discrimination. This happens in such a way that a person living with HIV AIDS can be called many names. One of them is a walking corpse. That is, it's the general knowledge of many people that a person living with HIV AIDS can die at any minute, that they have very little time to live. They don't take into consideration that there are many other diseases such as cancer, such as pneumonia, such as asthma, such as heart failures, such as hypertension. These also kill people as quickly as possible, but they only know that HIV AIDS is the killer disease. That is, once you get HIV AIDS, there is nothing for you except to wait for death. That is what they think. So in socially discriminating a person living with HIV AIDS, it brings much sadness to them, it brings much psychological problems to them. But in taking care of it, or in actually looking into the solutions for these problems, first of all, there should be a good education for the families and other people taking care of people living with HIV AIDS. So education is the key in which people can be educated on how to work, on how to live with people living with HIV AIDS, on how to take care of them, and to remove the social stereotypes about HIV AIDS. These stereotypes, such as HIV AIDS means death to a person, HIV AIDS is nothing good to a person. A person with HIV AIDS is usually involved into sexual promiscuity. Such stereotypes such as this should be removed from the minds of people. So giving them education can help to remove this. Also, the government should actually provide more centers, and also they should put aside a portion of the budget in which people living with HIV AIDS would get better services. So the government also has another function. Instead of giving education, they can also provide more centers. That is, they can build more centers, and also that there should be a portion of the budget which should be for the people living with HIV AIDS, in which they can get better services. So answering a question like this, it just requires your common sense, and that you should know on what to write. It does not require you to write on what is AIDS, on how it is. But if you have the time, you can write it. But most of the time, what the questionnaire wants is on mentioning how do they affect the person, on how does HIV affect a certain criteria, that how does it affect the family members, how does it affect the victims, and how does it affect the government. Moving on to our next question, we are asked that you work for Angaza, Tanzania, where you have been invited to a seminar about HIV AIDS. Explain on how you would take care of the patients with HIV AIDS. So this is another straightforward question, but it needs to be in essay form. So in a question like this, what is required is just mentioning and explaining how do you take care of a person living with HIV AIDS. But once writing this question, you should put it in your mind that you are writing it as if you are writing a speech to the seminar. But in writing the speech at that seminar, you should know on what to be written, on what points to be written. So a teacher would definitely look for a few key terms, a few points inside this essay. So in answering the question, you can write there are many points in which you can write, but among these points are, one of them is to always reassure them that they have a long life ahead of them. A person living with HIV AIDS usually goes around with the notion that I'm going to die today, or I'm going to die tomorrow, I have nothing left to live for. You should be there in taking care of a person living with HIV AIDS. You should be there to actually remove this notion from the head. You should actually tell them that you can live a long life with the correct diet, with the correct nutrients, with the correct lifestyle. You can live a very long and fruitful life. So in taking care of a person living with HIV AIDS, you should constantly reassure them that they have a long life ahead of them. Also, avoid using too much pity on them. Even though you think that you're helping them by pitying them, by always doing their work, please avoid on doing it too much. They also want to feel that they are normal human beings. So for instance, you can let them do small works inside the household. You can let them go to the market sometimes to buy a few groceries. You can let them even stay outside and talk to people, and then even start to go to exercising places. But do not, I repeat, do not stop them from doing these things. Once you stop them from doing these things by telling them that you're weak, you can't do these things, you have crushed their self-confidence. And how do you crush their self-confidence? By telling them that they can't do these things. You're thinking that you're doing it for their own good, but you're actually giving them the notion that they cannot do anything. And this is detrimental, as it, instead of making sure that the person starts to feel better, it makes them feel worse. And if a person feels worse psychologically, then the body's immunity lowers. Once it lowers, as HIV AIDS is characterized by opportunistic diseases, these diseases would begin to take hold and would increase the fatality period, that is the period of death. So pitying them too much can cause them to feel anxious, could cause them to feel depressed. Advise them on a balanced diet. As I said earlier, in order to live a long and healthy life, a balanced diet is very important. People living with HIV AIDS have a lower immunity than normal. So in order to increase their immunity, they should have a balanced diet. A diet which consists of all foods can help them regain strength, can help them regain the immunity that they have lost. Even though it would not be the same as before, but still it would give them a longer lifeline. So encouraging them to have a balanced diet is important in taking care of them. Let them perform normal duties. As I said before in the beginning, that do not pity them too much. This means that this one is correlated to the first one, that you should let them work, you should let them feel that they are worthy. Letting them work, letting them doing simple duties can help to make sure that the person living with HIV AIDS feels that they are wanted instead of doing everything for them. So letting them work can give them a sense of hope that they are wanted, that they can do anything, that they are able to contribute to the society. Another way of taking care of them is to avoid using certain terms while talking to people living with HIV AIDS. There are some terms such as corpses, death, weakness is very, very detrimental to a person living with HIV AIDS. Instead, give them hope. Tell them that they can live a longer life. Tell them that they are worthy. Tell them that they can work even though they are not that strong. You tell them that they are strong. Give them hope. While giving them hope, you can make them feel healthy again, as they can feel that they are wanted. And if a person feels happy, they feel healthy. Instead of keeping a person sad, instead of telling them that they are going to die tomorrow, you can just tell them that we have hope for you. You are doing great. Next time you can do better. Instead of telling them that you're going to die tomorrow, I'm sorry, but HIV AIDS has no known cure. Instead of telling them that, you just say that the cure has not been found yet, but people are currently working on finding a cure for HIV AIDS. Words like these tend to give them hope, tend to make them feel proud of themselves, that their status is nothing to be ashamed of. Also, in the conclusion, you can say that in taking care of people living with HIV AIDS, you should know that taking care of them requires a lot of work, but the only thing to remember is that they are human beings like us. So, a person living with HIV AIDS is a person. Be it that they have HIV AIDS, be it that they are not suffering from HIV AIDS, but in the end, they are still human beings. So in taking care of them, they should be reminded that they are normal human beings. That when you take care of them, you should not even view them as less than human beings. You should not show them that what they have is very bad. Instead, treat them like normal people. Tell them that what you have is normal, like malaria. What you have is normal, like TB. What you have is normal, like the flu. What you have is normal, just like a headache. But do not tell them that what you have is not normal. Do not start sentences with that, I heard so and so suffered from HIV AIDS and died after 2 months. Instead, say that, I hope that you can live for 10 or even 30 more years. This would give them hope, and this would be a better way of taking care of them. Moving on to our next question. In our third question, whereby we are asked to explain how HIV affects the immunity of the body in human beings. So a question like this, you're just required to mention the mechanism of the HIV AIDS virus. So in answering a question like this, you can just say HIV affects the immunity of the body by reducing the CD4 count of the WBCs, that is the white blood cells. And please take in note that while saying WBC, just like in the cells session, WBC means white blood cells and not World Boxing Championship. Please remind yourself that. Also, reducing the CD4 count of the white blood cells, how does it work? The virus attaches itself to the helper T cell, whereby it injects its RNA to the cell. We all know that HIV is a retrovirus. That is, it's a virus with RNA and not DNA. So once injecting its RNA into the host cell, the host cells begins producing more and more HIV viruses. Once enough viruses are produced, the cell dies by bursting and releasing the HIV viruses. These viruses then go and look for other helper T cells. Once they do this, every cell dies, the immunity is reduced. Finally, when a person has full-blown AIDS, one of the characteristics is the occurrence of opportunistic diseases. This happens because the body's immunity is very low, and this is how HIV works, by reducing the CD4 count or by destroying the helper T cells. Our fourth question states that to analyze the impact of HIV AIDS in the community and what can be done to control and manage the spread of HIV AIDS. This is a two-part question, a part with question A and B. But question A, this question has not been written as A and B. You should just put it in your head like that, because our first question says that you just have to analyze the impacts of HIV AIDS in the community. How does HIV AIDS affect the community? That's the first question. The second question you should ask on how to explain what can be done to manage the spread and to control the spread of HIV AIDS. So, in analyzing the impacts of HIV AIDS in the community, you just mention and explain what happens in the community. These impacts are, first of all, financial impacts. That is, they can impact the family, the victim, and the government, and the whole society since you take care of the person. Since the person, when they take care of themselves. Since when the government tries to build people living with HIV AIDS centers. All of this creates a financial strain, as much money is being lost into medicine, into building the place, into taking care of the victims. Social impacts. Social impacts include discriminations, crimes, and other things. Just because a person lives with HIV AIDS, many people take this as a chance to discriminate them, to make them feel that they are unwanted. For example, if a person lives with HIV AIDS, most of their neighbors would tell their children not to play with his children, not to even take anything from him. Why would they say that? Because they say that this person is sexually promiscuous, that he has many sexual partners, or she has had many sexual partners, that's why she has AIDS. While in controlling the spread of HIV AIDS, there are some practices which can be avoided. The first practice is refraining from multiple sexual partners. This has two parts. If a person has a sexual partner, you can choose to be faithful. That is, stay with one partner only. If he does not have a partner, then it's best to abstain from sexual contact. Why? Because this reduces the risk of having an HIV AIDS infection, as HIV is spread mostly through sexual contact, and even once, just one time, can guarantee a person of having HIV AIDS. Refrain from sharing needles, razors, and other utensils. Sharing needles, razors, and pins can tend to increase the spread of HIV AIDS. How? For instance, if your friend is using a razor blade but he's infected with HIV AIDS, if he cuts himself by bad luck with the razor, and you use the same razor and you cut yourself with the same razor, then there's a high possibility that you would get HIV AIDS. So by sharing this would make sure, or by sharing this would ensure that HIV AIDS would spread. So refraining from borrowing it could make, or refraining from actually borrowing these personal items such as razors could reduce the infection rate. Refraining from risky practices such as FGM, wife inheritance, and others. There used to be some practices, and there are some practices which can lead to the spread of HIV AIDS, such as penile genital mutilation, or FGM. Most of the time, most tribes in the villages use only one razor or knife to perform FGM on the girls of the whole village. So using one knife, if a person is infected, by using the same knife can cause the spread of HIV AIDS. Wife inheritance is also something else. Wife inheritance is also something else, because if a person's husband has HIV AIDS and dies whilst having slept with his wife, if another person, such as the brother, comes and inherits the wife, then there's a high possibility that the brother can have HIV AIDS. Also, always screening blood for transfusion in hospitals. In hospitals, this is not a common practice, but nowadays, most of the time, the blood is screened for HIV AIDS and other pathogens, because in transfusing of blood, this is also one of the easiest ways of getting HIV AIDS, since it goes directly to the bloodstream where the HIV virus works. So if you do not screen the blood, and for instance you have a blood match, but that blood match has HIV AIDS, you do not have HIV AIDS. When the blood is inserted into you or is transfused inside you, then there is a high possibility that you have HIV AIDS. So screening the blood can reduce this. So these are a few ways on controlling and managing the spread of HIV AIDS. Our last question for the day states that how are STIs, HIV and AIDS related, and how they are different? Well, these three terms are very interrelated. STIs, HIV and AIDS. Well, they're all related in the sense that they're all spread through sexual contact. That is, STIs are sexually transmitted infections, while HIV and AIDS are another disease which is caused by sexual contact. So the relationship is that they are all the mode of causing, that is, their caused or mode of transmission is through sexual contact. Their main differences is that STIs are infections which arise through sexual contact, and that they can be caused by microorganisms such as bacteria, viruses, and fungi. That STIs do not have a singular mode of transmission, that their mode of transmission is sexual contact, but which agent transmits the STIs? There are other agents such as there are bacteria, there are viruses, and also there are fungi which tend to spread these STIs. For instance, gonorrhea is caused by a bacterium. Gonorrhea is caused by a bacterium in which its name is Neisseria gonorrhea. That is a bacteria which causes gonorrhea. Or hepatitis B is caused by a virus. and chlamydia is caused by a fungus. So we can see that STIs have more than one causing agent, that they can be either bacterial infections such as gonorrhea and syphilis, they can be viral infections such as hepatitis B, and they can be fungal infections such as chlamydia. Also, STIs can be spread through the sharing of personal items such as towels, underwear, and so on. So, in sharing of these things such as towels and underwears can cause the spread of STIs. Well, this shows that how easy it is to gain STIs, such as because it is more than just sexual contact. It's also through personal item sharings. While HIV is a virus which affects the human's immunity, its long form is the human immunodeficiency virus. So HIV is nothing more than just a virus which has the long form of H, which is human, I, which is immunodeficiency, and V as a virus. So this virus is the one that causes AIDS. So AIDS is caused by a virus, a retrovirus in fact, which is known as HIV. And AIDS is the disease which is caused by the inability of the helper T cells to aid in their immunity and is caused by HIV. So AIDS is the disease. We have seen that HIV is the virus, it's just a cause, and AIDS is the disease. And in which we can see that AIDS has the long form of, whereby A is acquired, I immune, D is the deficiency, and S is the syndrome. So AIDS is nothing but the acquired immune deficiency syndrome. So this is the disease in which the inability of helper T cells to provide protection to the body or immunity. This is caused by HIV. So these are the differences between STIs, HIV, and AIDS. And also that HIV AIDS is what you call a sexually transmitted disease, and it is only caused by a virus which affects humans only. By this, we have completed our question and answer session, and also by this we have completed our O-level question and answer session for biology. From the beginning to the end, you were with me, Munir Mustafa, as we delved into questions and we looked into the answers and how to answer them. From here, from me and here and the others here at SUZA TV, we thank you and we welcome you for other projects or other programs to come. Thank you.